I'm sorry?
There's a message
Harriet,
on my
what?
phone which says, sponge feeds by filtering or discrimination, without which there is no usefulness coming out. The
Yeah,
example
I'm
of a
not.
sponge.
Oh, the
Oh,
sponge.
sponge. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't quite. Can you give me the phrase again that you said? I didn't hear it
Pada
all.
from Mumbai, Santa Cruz, you want to say, talk to Douglas direct?
Okay, which one?
Sure.
He must have stepped out. Basically, someone says that a sponge feeds by filtering or discrimination, without which there is no usefulness coming out.
Ah, okay. So he's talking
One
about,
can
he's getting
interpret
really scientific. After all my efforts to make this a scientific group. Okay. Well, you know,
That is
the
a
beauty
metaphor,
actually.
actually.
Yeah, the beauty of using a metaphor is there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's possibly embedded in a metaphor. I was using the most trivial application of a sponge, of just being able to squeeze it. But I think if we got into the how a sponge really works, we might have many other teaching stories from it. So I will look into I'll look into the science of spongeography or sponge something. Spongeology, I guess.
Douglas, can you take a question from Bangalore?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of background noise right at the moment.
We have Cunningham Road. Someone's coming at Cunningham Road. Huh? Hi, Prasad. I can see you in Cunningham Road.
Yeah. I'm asking Douglas, can he take a question before we reconvene?
Yes.
Sure, yes.
The background to the question is, knowledge sharing is through knowledge caring.
Knowledge sharing is through knowledge caring?
Caring.
Okay.
How do we ensure that people care and share? Because communication is very important to do this. And let's analyze this in an IT domain. How do we make this happen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a little advanced for where we are right now in this introduction. I think the answer rests, though, in the concept of communities of practice, which is what we're going to discuss in the next session. Communities of practice are made up of individuals that have a common objective, and they help each other. They need to build trust amongst each other so that they feel like they want to share. Remember before I said one of the misconceptions about knowledge management is that people want to hoard their knowledge? When you're in a community of practice with other people with whom you have trust and built a trusting relationship, you want to share with them. You care about them, you care about helping them, and they care about helping you. And a very healthy organization is one with very healthy communities of practice, where the knowledge sharing takes place amongst trusted individuals, people who trust and care for each other. And that's an important part of knowledge management. We're going to cover that in the next session when we talk about communities of practice. That's an excellent question and points at some of the difficulties of doing knowledge management effectively. There needs to be sharing, but in order to have sharing, there needs to be that caring and that trust. Good question.
Thank you, Douglas.
I'll keep it here. Okay, I think we're getting close to starting. This is an abbreviated session of 45 minutes. As soon as I get a sign from somebody that I can go ahead, we'll do that. Maybe, Darius, you can put, you know why I keep calling you Darius? Because I knew somebody once who had that name, and that's why I'm not going to be able to change it. But you said it was okay, right?
Right, I'm absolutely okay.
I understand you prefer Darius, though?
Yeah, but it's fine. I like the roll in the tongue.
Okay, well, I will try to do that, but I'll be embarrassing myself because half the times it'll be right and half the times it'll be wrong. But anyway, if you could put up, if you can put up the session too.
Sure.
We can call him Doug. He can call you Dara.
Okay, and session 2, we have an abbreviated session here. It'll only be about 45 minutes, but then we'll have a 30-minute question and answer and wrap up, and Harry will take control back again. And in session 2, We're going to talk about the end game. I've already mentioned that's where KM needs to be heading. And the concept is described by the two words connect and collect. And we'll find out what those two mean. Then we're going to talk about the rationale for KM, creating the knowledge imperative, and I'll show you one or two models, depending on how much time we have, that are pretty powerful to convince those of you who are able to be convinced that knowledge management is absolutely essential. We must do it. And some of that is supported by the case studies. But we've already talked about Ford Motor Company and British Petroleum. I'll give you just a little more details on them and some of the things that made them successful. And then hopefully, if we have just a few minutes, we'll introduce personal KM. All right, on the next slide, we're talking about the communities of practice. And I'm going to show you two models. Various experts in knowledge management say there are multiple different types of communities of practice. Some say 4, others say plus or minus a few. I'm going to give you two extremes. I don't know what the exact number is. In fact, if you truly understand connect and collect, you'll understand that there is really an infinite variety of communities of practice types of models. So at one extreme is the subject matter expert model. If you can see that on the screen, you see the center person has arrows flowing out from that subject matter expert. It's what we call one to many. And it looks like the depiction on the right-hand side of the screen, an individual talking or passing on knowledge, doling out knowledge, we might say, to the community. Does this model remind you of anything? This model should remind you of the scholastic method, the medieval period, where the professor was professing. And that's what we see here. So the subject matter expert is somebody with considerable knowledge, and others come to that person to get that knowledge. He doles it out when it's requested. The other extreme end of models, of community practice models, is the one depicted next, which is more of a knowledge sharing model. You see the arrows are two directional. It's many to many. And if you wanted a picture of what that might look like, it looks like a group of folks huddled around a center. And the focus is on, in any instant, some are giving and some are taking. There's many stories that could evolve around that simple picture. Let me just point out one or two just to give you a sense for it. And some of the mistakes that are often made in knowledge management. When people early on in knowledge management, and that means either in the 1990s for countries that were getting well into knowledge management, and more very much more recently in companies that didn't touch knowledge management until quite recently. When they get very excited about doing knowledge management, typically the HR department says, well, you know, we'll help you, KM folks. We'll get involved with you. We're very good at rewards and incentive programs, and we know those are important. So let's develop a reward and incentive program that rewards that senior person on the right-hand side of that picture. You see the person looks as old as I am, has a briefcase full of stuff. And if we had more time, I could explode this little description out to have more color to it. But basically, the conclusion is, yes, that person says, this is fine. I love this new rewards and incentive systems because I have a briefcase full of stuff, and you're asking me to put knowledge into the repository, and my only question is, how much do you want? Because I could literally dump my briefcase over and give you tons of stuff. Now, you know I'm avoiding the word. What word am I avoiding here? For those of you really listening carefully, how much of that stuff might be just what? Crap?
Downloaded.
You know, if that fellow is as old as I think he might be, he could have some stuff in there from 30 or 40 years ago. And how relevant might that be today?